Okay, so we're starting with our fabric folded over, as you can see, and you're going to want to make sure that for the width of this fold you have at least your thigh measurement divided by 2 plus maybe 3-4 inches extra, just so that this is wide enough, because I made the mistake of not checking that and now I'm starting over. But anyway, that aside, the first thing that I'm going to do is to come here, because this is going to be like the waist area, and this is sort of how it's going to go. So the hem is going to be somewhere around here, right? So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to measure down by 1.5 inches, and I'm going to mark a horizontal line that is 1.5 inches from the edge of my fabric here, and that is going to serve as the waistline. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first of all, and then after that we're going to proceed to mark all the horizontal points. So now that we're done with that, this is our waistline. From that point, I'm going to, so now all of the measurements that we're taking, starting up here, we would start measuring from this point, not from this point, but from the waistline right here. So from there, I'm going to first of all measure my hip line, which you take this measurement by starting from your waist and then seeing where your hip falls. So I'm going to measure my hip line and then my crotch depth and the full length of my shorts. So now that we have all our horizontal points, we have our waistline, hip line, crotch depth, and full length. On my waistline and my hip line, I'm going to divide my hip measurement by 4 and add in an inch for sewing allowance, and I'm going to mark that on both lines here. So just the hip and the waistline. Alright, then I'm going to extend that line down to my crotch line actually. Now from this point, at the crotch line, from this point we're going to come out a bit more, and in order to determine that, we're going to take what we have here, which is that hip measurement, so just exactly what you have from this point to this point, and divide that by 4, like that. And so we're going to create a curve, because as you can see, this is like just it creates that sharp L shape there, and that is not what your shorts are supposed to look like. So we're going to, if you have a French curve, this is where it comes in handy, but I would just freehand a curve that starts at this point right here and ends here. So next up, I'm going to go on the hem of the shorts, and I'm going to take my thigh measurement and divide that by 2. And because these shorts, I would like them to be kind of loose, I'm not going for that like a fitted look. So I'm going to add, I think I'll add either 1.5 inches or 2 inches, just for sewing allowance and for some ease as well. So there we have it, and now I'm going to connect those 2 points together. So next up, I'm going to do the markings for my dart, and all I'm going to do is start from my center front right here, which is right here, and I'm going to come back by usually I do either 4 inches or 4.5 inches. Okay, so I came from my center front right here, I came 4.5 inches back, and I marked that because that is going to be the center of my dart. So seeing as this is the center of the dart, I'm going to mark ½ an inch on either side of this dart, and then from that same center front right there at that corner, I'm going to take my actual waist measurement, because remember when we started we used the hip measurement up here and here as well. So now I'm going to take my actual waist measurement, divide that by 4, and then add an inch for sewing allowance and another inch because of this dart right here. So I'm just going to connect this to my hip line, and I'm going to, from this line right here, this waistline, I'm going to go up by 1 inch, and then I'm going to connect this to the dart area. So like I'm going to smooth it into the waistline, as you can see here. I'm making sure I get this down to the waistline by the time I get to this dart, like that. So you can see I connect this point back to the waistline at that dart point. So this is what we have, and now I'm just going to pin all of this down and cut it out. So before we proceed, here's what the 2 front pieces of our shorts look like so far. So next up, we're going to use this to cut the back pieces, but we're going to of course make some modifications. All right, so we have our fabric folded over, and we have the front piece laying here. And as you can see, I also kind of let it, I'm not letting it sit exactly on the edge of my fabric, so I have a little bit of a gap there. So I think like maybe an inch of space here would be completely fine. Now, like most of the distinction between the front piece and the back piece happens at this inner thigh / crotch area. So that's where we're going to be working. This part right here mostly remains the same, right, except for the waist area, which you would see in a minute. So the first thing that I'm going to do is on the waistline up here, I'm going to first of all come up by 1.5 inches. This is why I didn't let this start like exactly on the edge of the fabric, because we need room for that. So I'm going to come up by 1.5 inches, and I'm just going to like stretch that out a bit, just like that, just so it's visible enough. And we will come back to that in a moment. So now that I've done that, I'm also going to go to the crotch area, and I'm going to come out by 1.5 inches as well. And then I'm going to go on the hem, and I'm going to come in by 1 inch. Right, so I'm just going to draw this out, like the crotch line. I'm just going to sort of trace that like that, and then I'm going to connect it to that line. Now on that same crotch line, I'm going to actually go down by 1/2 inch. So that is the new crotch line, and I'm going to come here, and right here where we have the crotch line up here, where we have this, I'm going to also come in by 1.5 inches. Now this extension that I did here, where I came up by 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches I would say is probably the minimum that I would advise. You could come up by 2 inches, you could come up by 2.5. I think it depends on how much allowance you need at the back of your pants or shorts or like whatever it is you're sewing, but I think 1.5 is sort of like standard-ish, so that's like, that should be fine for most sizes. But yeah, so now because we came in here by 1.5 inches as you saw me do here, and of course that now takes away from the waist measurement, I'm going to come on the waistline and come out here by 1.5. so that 1.5 that we took out from here, I'm just basically putting it back in on this other end. So I've marked that, and remember how we came up here on the waistline at the front, so we're going to maintain that. So this is going to be the same like height of the waistline, if you get what I mean. So I'm just going to sort of transfer that same height onto this new waistline that we have, and then I'm going to connect this to the hip line here, and the rest of it remains the same. So I'm going to connect this point to this point right here. If you have a ruler, then you definitely want to use that instead of your measuring tape. So here's what we have as our new waistline, and then this is where the crotch goes down. So I think I'm just going to trace what I have on my crotch here, just so I can use that to like, because this is not the actual crotch line, this is the new one we're using, but in order to transfer the measurements onto here, like, just watch what I'm going to do. So I just traced that for reference purposes, right? So I'm just going to lift this temporarily, and now I can just like mark 1.5 away from that one. Then remember, this lower one is the one we're using, not this one up here. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So this continuous line right here is our new crotch line. So I'm just going to lay this back out, just because I'm going to be tracing the hem onto our current piece. And then I'm going to be cutting exactly like following the front piece here, and then going onto our new waistline and all of that. So now I'm ready to cut it out. I think at this point I would just also mark my darts like we did on the front onto the back. So I'm going to go for the same way we did on the front, 4.5 inches from the center front, and I'm going to mark that, and then I'm also going to mark 1/2 inch on either side of that. There it is, and now we can cut.
Hold on this inner crotch area, I realized later that I should have added 1.5 inches because it caused problems later for me. So please, if you're recreating, add 1.5 inches on your inner crotch area as well.
So this is our front piece, as you remember, and that is the back. So I'm also just going to go ahead and make a tiny notch right where I marked the center point of the dart, just so I have that on both pieces of fabric, so you can see, right? So I know where my dart is going to be. So now we have both pieces prepped and ready. Back piece, the notched that area right there, and then the front piece, and you can see where I notched for that as well. So now that these are done, we're going to, I think the next thing to cut should be, let's start with the waistband, because I think that'll be the easiest, and then we can start cutting the pockets. For these shorts, the picture only has two pockets, which are like on the two sides, but I'm contemplating making pockets on the back as well. I'm not 100% sold on that yet, but let's start with the waistband and the two side pockets first of all. Alright, so here's how I like to cut my waistband. First of all, I'm going to trim off this part of the fabric, just because I don't really like having this edge, like with the texture and all of that. I don't know, I just like to trim this part off first of all. So we're just going to do that quickly. And okay, so now we have a straight edge, and we're cutting on the fold. So I take my waist measurement, and because these shorts have like that overlapping front where you have the button and everything, so I'm not going to use exactly my waist measurement. I take my waist measurement and I add like maybe at least 3 inches and at most 4 inches, just to have enough allowance to do that overlap, and of course to make sure the ends of the waistbands are neatly finished. So I'm going to take my waist measurement, add about 4 inches to that, and divide that by 2, and that is what I'm going to be measuring here on my folded fabric. I have that marked. And for the thickness of my waistband, this, when I'm sewing it, it will be folded over and then tucked in. So because I want the thickness to be roughly 2 inches, maybe a bit smaller, I'm going to multiply 2 inches by 2, because like I demonstrated, it's going to be folded over. So 2 inches multiplied by 2, that will give me 4. Then I'm going to add 1 inch because we need that allowance as well. So that makes up 5 inches. Alright, so I have a rectangle here, and I'm basically going to cut this out, and this is my waistband. Alright, so now we are onto the cargo pocket. So I have my fabric folded over, and I think I'm just going to trim off first of all this rough edge right here. And typically this will depend on how big you want your pockets to be, but the measurements that I'm using for these shorts, I'm going for 8 inches wide and 9 inches long. So I'm just going to measure the length first of all. Because this is folded over, if it's going to be 8 inches wide, you divide that by 2, and so you have 4. So you want to make sure you have 4 here, and we do. So this is basically the pocket. Now, just a reminder, whatever measurements that you're using, make sure to keep in mind that in terms of the length, you are going to hem one end of the pocket, that's the like mouth of the pocket, and then also while attaching your pocket, you're going to lose about ½ an inch on these sides, because it will need to be folded over to be sewn on. So don't use the exact size that you want your pocket to be as the measurements that you make while you are cutting. So at least add ½ an inch for the perimeters of the pocket, and then for the mouth area, which would be hemmed most likely with a double fold, you should maybe add at least almost an inch for that. So now I'm going to cut this out, and I'm going to use this piece to cut the second pocket, because they are exactly the same thing. So one little thing that I like to do when I'm making pockets is to draw arrows so I remind myself like which way is vertical and which way is horizontal. So the arrows typically are pointing to either the top or the bottom of the pockets, just because like sometimes it's almost a square, so the length is only slightly longer than the width, so it can be easy to make a mistake. So I just usually on the wrong side of fabric will draw an arrow just to remind myself. Another thing I wanted to mention is when I cut the pockets, I felt like I looked at them and I felt like they looked a bit too big, so I trimmed off like almost an inch from the width and then ½ an inch from the length, and I hope I don't live to regret this. I hope it doesn't make my pockets look smaller than I want, but they just look really big. Now we're going to move on. The next piece we're going to cut is the flap that goes over the pocket, and after that we'll go ahead and cut the extenders, so those things that make your cargo pockets look 3D. If you don't want extenders on your pockets, then you can just go ahead and do the flap, and I think that could be fine. That's how I did the cargo pockets on my cargo sweatpants, so that also works as well. So like whatever you would prefer. So let's go ahead now and start on the pocket flaps. So the pocket flaps have to be the same width with your pockets, so we're going to use the same measurements we have for the width of the pocket, and that's going to be the width of the flaps. And then for the length of the flap, I think maybe we could, in terms of cutting, of course, like I said, you always have to take note of all the sewing allowances that you would need. So while cutting, I think 4 inches would be fine for the pocket flaps, or maybe we could go for 4.5 just to be on the safe side, because it's better if it's too long and then we can always trim off the excess. So I think, yeah, I'm going to go for 4.5, And yeah, so I'm going to cut this on the fold because the pocket flap is actually double layered, right? So each pocket flap needs 2 pieces, so we're going to cut this 4 times. So here are my pockets and the pocket flaps. So you can see that the pocket flaps are the same width with the pockets, and we want to keep it that way. Oh wait, I think I'm going to have to trim this like a tiny bit here, but like, yeah, you get the point. So now that we're done with these, we're going to go right ahead and cut the extenders. So this is just basically going to be a slim long strip of fabric, and you want to make sure before starting out with these that maybe you measure around your pocket, because the extenders go all the way around the pocket, so this way, and this way. So I'm just going to measure my pockets, right, and I'm going to make sure that I have at least that length and probably like a few extra inches, just because it's better to be safe than sorry. So it's better if it's too long, then I can trim off the excess. If it's too short, that's going to be just more headache. So I'm going to go ahead now and do that. All right, so after measuring, I found out that the length around my pockets, each one is just a little over 24 inches. So I think to be safe, I would just go for 26 inches in length, and the thickness that I'm going for is 2 inches. So if you want yours to be thicker, of course, go wider. Here's what each of them looks like, or look like. Basically just 2 long strips of fabric. So I'm going to also put these aside. And then lastly, for these pockets have so many pieces, but they have those like loop things, like I don't even know what to call these, but the things that sort of are connected with the D-rings, things that are going to sort of connect with these D-rings on the pockets. So those as well are just like 2 straps that like hang off the pocket. So I'm going to cut long strips of fabric as well, and I think I'm going to go for just a slightly narrower thickness than this. So this is 2¼ inches. I think I'm going to go for just a little under 2 inches thick. In terms of length, probably somewhere around 10 inches maybe. First of all, please ignore all these markings here. This was made initially and it was a mistake. Now this is my back leg, like the back of the leg of my shorts, and I have this here because the first thing you need to do, the next step that we're going to take, is to cut the piece that is sort of like, it goes around the hem of the shorts if you look at the inspiration picture. So you would need to first of all measure what you have on the hem here and multiply that by 2. So I've done that, and with that measurement multiplied by 2, I have 28 inches. So I have my fabric folded over here, and what I'm going to do now is to cut that, like the cuff thing that goes around the hem of the shorts. So 28 divided by 2 is 14. So I made sure first of all that I have 14 inches here when I fold over, and then in terms of the thickness, I'm going to cut 5 inches. So if you would like yours to be thicker, then of course you go wider. If you want yours narrow, then you go smaller. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut this really wide rectangle, and then I'm going to cut a second one for the second leg. Okay, so now that that is done, and the last thing that we need to cut is actually second to the last. So we're going to cut the belt loops. I typically don't wear belts, but I like how this looks on the shorts in the inspiration picture, so I'm going to go ahead and cut that. And then the last pieces would be like the pieces needed for the zipper fly in front. Now I have a whole video where I have a whole video dedicated to showing you how to sew a zipper fly, how to cut all the pieces you need, sew in the zipper, and like do the whole thing. So I would link that in the description box. If you would like to see that, if you're not familiar with that process and you would like to see that, I would have it in the description box. For this video, next up, I'm just going to show you how I'm cutting the belt loops, and I'm not going to be repeating the whole process of the zipper fly here, just because there's another video on my channel with that, and I will have that linked in the description box. So please let me know if you have problems accessing this video. Right, so I have my fabric folded over here, and I haven't actually done belt loops before, but like they look pretty basic. So I think I'm just going to cut like thin strips of fabric, or a thin strip of fabric, and then sew it, turn it right side out, and cut it into like shorter 2.5-inch long pieces, and those end up being the belt loops. So for the thickness of this, I'm going for 1¾ inches wide, and I think I'm just going to do however many belt loops this would take. Or maybe I'll just cut another one because this looks short, so maybe this might only be able to do like 4, and I was thinking I could do 6. So I'll cut this a second one. Right, now we can actually start sewing, which is the fun part. So I decided last minute to cut pockets for the back. So we're going to have back pockets, but these are just basic patch pockets, flat and like the slightly pointed bottom right here. So these are the pockets, and yeah. Okay, so here with me are all of our pockets and like the pieces and everything that we need for the pockets. So these are the 2 back pockets that I cut, and these are pocket flaps, side pockets, and these pieces are like the straps that hang from the pockets, and these are like the pocket extenders. So now we're going to start sewing, and the first thing that I'm going to do is actually to use the pocket extenders, and I'm just going to sew them like all the way around, right? And of course we're just going to leave the mouth of the pocket open. So I'm going to sew on the extenders on each of the pockets, and I'm also going to take the straps, the pieces that we cut for the straps, and I'm going to prep them as well. And by that I mean, so because these straps are going to have these D-rings on them, and I think this part is like completely optional. So if you are not really interested in having straps hanging from your pockets, then you can skip this step. But I'm going to first of all cut these in 2. So there are 2 straps, 1 for each pocket. So first of all, I'm going to cut out 3 inches from them, because that short piece with the 3 inches is going to be the part where I attach the D-ring, and that part is actually going to be hanging from the pocket flap, and then the rest of it is going to be on the actual pocket, and then you can sort of pass it through the D-ring, and like that is the closure for the pocket. Okay, so I've gone ahead to cut the shorter piece, which is 3 inches long, and what we're going to do for these shorter pieces is to fold them over this way and sew one end closed. That's the open end, of course, so that end closed, and then turn it right side out so the rough edges are inside. So I'm going to do that for the shorter pieces and the longer pieces as well. The only difference is when I'm sewing that end closed on the longer piece, I'm just going to, when I get here, I'm also going to sew one of these ends closed. So when I'm going to have this closed, and then I'm going to turn it right side out through the open end right here. So that's what we're going to do for our pocket straps. And then these patch pockets we have at the back, I'm just going to go ahead and hem the mouth of the pocket and then press 1/2 inch in on the other 3, or actually for the other like 4 sides of the pockets. So it would be prepped and ready to be sewn onto the shorts. So I'm just like basically prepping all the pocket pieces right now. I think this is like there are just so many pieces. All right, so our pieces are coming together nicely. Our pocket straps are here. Unfortunately, like I realized that this chalk was, I think I was a bit too enthusiastic with it, because like now it's showing up on the right side of my fabric even though I drew on the wrong side. Hopefully that washes out, but yeah. So I have these, I got 2 sets of these D-rings because we need 2 on each of these things. So these ones that we cut shorter, the 3-inch ones, I'm simply going to loop it through like this, and this is how I need it to look when I attach it to my pocket flap, because this is how it's going to hang from the pocket flaps, right? That's why we had to prep them before prepping the pocket flaps. But before we do that, there's a lot of top stitching anyway, but I just wanted to show you that. And then these longer pieces would be attached to the pocket itself. So I think I'm going to come up from the bottom of the pocket about 2 inches, and of course in the middle of the pocket, and then this is where it would be. So when the pocket flap is down this way with the D-rings hanging down, you can sort of loop this through and it would kind of hang down like this. But yeah, to attach this to the pockets, I'm simply going to place it like this. Remember, we have one end of it sewn closed, so the open end I would place this way and sew like this first of all, then flip it over and secure it here. Probably just sew like a square just to secure it there, make sure it's nice and stable. Now, like I said, there's a lot of top stitching before I get to that. So first of all, for my 3D pockets, I'm going to top stitch all the way around the pockets like this, and I'm also going to hem the mouth of the pockets, so like all the way this way. And then I'm going to top stitch these straps as well, just by going all the way across the edge and then sewing. Okay, no, this is the open end. So on the closed end, I'm going to start here at the open end, just right on the edge, all the way up here this way, and then back down. And all of this is mostly optional, but I feel like this is like something that, I don't know, I feel like it would sort of step up the look a bit. So you don't have to do all this unnecessary top stitching if you don't want to. So like the straps are fine like this if you're fine with that. But yeah, so I want to top stitch these straps first of all before attaching them to my pocket flaps. So like I demonstrated, once the top stitching is done, I would loop my D-rings through this shorter one and I would put it inside, right? And then I'm going to sew my pocket flap, here, here, and here. I'm going to leave one end open, and that is the end that is going to be sewn onto the shorts themselves. But for like on this side, I would have my D-ring secured there while I'm sewing like this. And I'm also going to go ahead and top stitch all around the pocket flaps. So that's what I'm going to do now, all of the top stitching and securing this piece to the pocket flaps. So let's do that. Here's what our pockets look like. And as you can see, like all of that top stitching I did, I feel like it just gave it like a little bit more definition. I don't know, but like I said, all of that is extra work and it's optional. So these are my cargo pockets. So these are my cargo pockets, and I have here the extenders tucked in. So the next thing that we're going to do, like I have done for every cargo project I have, I like to sew the outer tie first of all. And then after doing that, I proceed to attach my pockets. And if you look at the inspiration picture for these shorts, you would see that these pockets are not like perfectly aligned to be on the side. So they sit more to the front, although they still lay on that side seam, but more of the pocket is seen from the front of the shorts. So when I'm sewing my pockets to my shorts, I'm not going to centralize it on the side seam. I'm going to make sure there's more of it showing at the front. And then yeah, I hope that explanation was clear enough. But basically, I have the two legs of my shorts here. You can see here on top is the front leg, and then the other one at the back is the back. I also went ahead and pinned the patch pocket onto the back, because after doing this whole process, I'm also going to sew that pocket onto the back. So really, I just tried to centralize it. I took it about 2.5 inches down from this area right here, and I just tried to make sure it's not too much to the side and it's not too much to the center back. But yeah, so what I'm going to do is to sew this closed, and then most likely sew that patch pocket onto the back, and I'll do that for both legs. Then I will come back and show you how I figure out the placements for this pocket. Now I have the two legs of my pants laying out here, and you can see the back pockets have already been secured. Honestly, like, full disclosure, I look-y feel like these shorts are not my size. Like, I don't know, I'm looking at them and I'm like, is that right? But anyway, moving on. Now we're going for the placement of the cargo pockets, and really I typically just eyeball it and try to make sure I get both of like the two legs to be on the same, like to look the same, right? Because they're supposed to be exactly the same. So I think from the hem, maybe 1.1 inch and a quarter could be the distance between the bottom and the bottom of the pocket, just because I'm also looking at the space between the two pockets as well. So I think that's fine. And then from that side seam that we can see here, I think we can let the pocket extend from that point, I think 1.5 inches. So you know how I was saying that this cargo pocket is more in the front than like perfectly aligned on the side? So I think for me, I'm just going to let it pass over like the side seam by 1.5 inches. So kind of like this. So it's like sitting on the side seam, but it's practically all in the front, just because of how it looks from the picture. I think this is sort of how it was placed. So having it here, my pocket flap is of course going to be right on top of the pocket, and I think I would just leave like a little, like roughly about 1/2 inch in between them. Honestly, just a little bit of space, because I don't want this to be on top of that pocket. And in terms of attaching this, it's going to be, we're not sewing on the pocket itself, it's going to be on the extender, of course. So it's just going to, I'm just going to go all the way like this, like that, and then press it down. So I'm going to attach the pocket, and then to attach the flap, I'm just going to sew a straight seam to secure it this way, and then I would fold it over and then sew another straight seam to hold it down. And that's basically going to be the look. So I'm going to sew on my two cargo pockets, and then I think we can flip it over like this and sew the inner thigh, because I really want to try this on and make sure it's my size. So let's go. Let me just tell you, I have been through a lot in the past few hours. So I was saying about how these shorts were looking smaller than they should have been, and I was concerned about this not being my size. And I measured them again, and it turns out I was right. So I used the wrong measurements, like my older measurements, instead of my more recent ones. And so turns out they were going to be too tight. But I was able to do a quick fix. So if you look here, you can see that I added this whole panel right here. So I had to, because I had already attached this pocket, so I had to like seam rip that off, open up the side, put this here, and then put my pocket back. but I believe now the crisis has been averted. And yeah, so now we can proceed. Another thing is that somehow I forgot to also do the back dart before putting the back pockets initially. I'm blaming all these mistakes on the fact that it was really late last night and I was sleep deprived. So I had to rip this pocket off as well, so the back pocket, and then do my darts. So please don't make the same annoying mistakes that I made. Be sure to put your darts before you put your pockets, and of course make sure that you're using your accurate measurements so you don't have to go through the ordeal that I just did, because if I didn't have spare fabric to create this panel, I would have had to scrap this and start over and buy more fabric, and then this fabric that I had already started working on would be wasted, which would have been so sad. But yeah, so the shirts are coming together nicely. So you can see the cargo pocket is more visible to the front of the shorts, like I was saying. So this is the front and this is the back. I just wanted you to see both sides. And like I said, I went on to also sew the inner thigh. So now that we're done with that, I'm actually just going to sew the crotches together and then do the zipper fly area. So like I mentioned before, I would link a detailed tutorial where I show you how to do a zipper fly in the description box. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now for these shorts, and then I think after that all that will be left to be the waistband and the band that goes around the hem, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, but I'm definitely going to sew in my front darts as well, just so I don't forget that too. So I'm going to sew in the front darts along with the whole like zipper area and then joining both legs together. But honestly, I really love how the pocket looks. Like, this is really nice. I'm proud of this one. So now that we're done with the zipper in front of the in front of the shorts, like all that's left now is mostly finishing touches. So we have the waistband, which is that piece right there, and then the two pieces for the hems of the legs, and also I'm putting belt loops on my waistband, but that's going to be the very last thing. So first of all, I'm going to do the leg pieces. So I have exactly the amount I need for each leg plus about half an inch. So you can see here when I place it like right up next to the leg, you can see that there's just some allowance left to sew this end closed. And so what I'm going to do, this part that you're looking at here is the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to sew this end closed for both pieces, and then I'm going to fold it over on my ironing board like this and press that. And then I'm also going to press in half an inch on the raw edges and tuck that inwards. So it's going to look something like this. So all of the rough edges are going to be inside. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So that's basically prepping these two pieces to be attached to the legs. And I think while I'm at the ironing board, I'm also just going to show you how I'm prepping the belt loops. So I already did one. This is what it's supposed to look like. So you can see it's just one long narrow strip that I'm going to cut into maybe 3-inch lengths. So here's what it started out looking like. And then I'm simply going to fold both edges inwards like this, and then fold it one more time to keep those rough edges inside. And then when I'm sewing, I'm just going to sew that closed on the edge here all the way down. And I'll probably do another stitch on the other edge, just because like I see belt loops some of them have like 2 stitches running down both sides. So the one on this end closes this whole thing, and the one on the other end is more just for aesthetic purposes, honestly. So I'm going to press this one, then I'm also going to press the leg cuffs, and we proceed to attach them. All right, and here we are. So I've prepped the cuffs for the legs, and I placed this one already just so I can show you exactly how I'm going to sew it. So as you can see, I tucked in half an inch at the ends, like to tuck away the rough edge, and then where is it, I sew this side closed. So you can see that even on the inside, like you can't see the rough seam, which is exactly what I want. So it's just like a whole circle and it goes around the leg. So I just sandwiched the hem in between these 2 folded edges like this, and I'm just going to use my straight stitch to go so like really close to the edge, but not like try to keep it straight, and just go all the way around, making sure that I'm holding both the cuffs and the hem together. And that is what I'm going to do on both legs. So we'll be done with the hemming. Now I also went ahead and prepped the waistband, and I put my interfacing as well. So I ironed my interfacing onto it, and I basically pressed it the same way I pressed the piece that we're using on the hems, which is with half an inch inside to tuck away the rough edges, and then I folded it over. So this is what we have. So I'm going to go ahead and sew the hems first of all, and then we'll get to the waistband and those belt loops. I'm so happy with the outcome so far. So here's what the hem looks like. This is really nice. I am really I'm really hoping that these chalk markings come off when I wash these shorts. But anyway, I went ahead to snip the belt loops, and I think there were like 8. I got 8 of them, and I probably don't need that much, but this was how many I got from the piece that I made. Anyway, now going to the waistband, because this is like the waistband and the belt loops is all we have left to do. I'm simply going to measure my waist here, like what I have, and I'm going to make sure I take into account this overlapping part right here. So I'm going to measure all the way around, starting from here and ending here, so that I know exactly how many inches I have going around. And then I'm going to, if for example I have say 30 inches going around, I'm going to measure this waistband that I have here, this one that I prepped with the interfacing and everything, and then I'm going to, on this one, make sure that I get 31 inches. So say 31 inches stops here, I'm going to cut this off, and then on each end I'm going to sew in half an inch to close off the edge. Now I usually close off the raw edge by opening it up and folding it over like this, right? And then I just use a straight stitch to sew all the way like that, and then I turn it right side out. That way all the rough edges are inside. So I do that on both ends, and by doing what I did, which is measuring here, adding an extra inch, and then taking out that extra inch by doing half an inch here and half an inch on the other end, after doing that I have exactly what I need as the full length of this waistband. And then the next step would be to sandwich the waist of my shorts in between the waistband. So I'm just simply going to open it up and place it about half an inch inside, so basically the same length with this folded part here. So I'm just going to place it like this and like that, so kind of what we did on the hem as well. So I do that and I sew it all the way around, and that way my waistband is all secured and finished. And then of course after that I add my button on this part. So the button goes on the part that's behind, so I add my button on this part, and then I make my buttonhole on the other part that overlaps like this. I have a buttonhole foot on my sewing machine. Typically tabletop sewing machines have that, so that is what I usually use. So that's what I'm going to use to do my buttonhole. And then seeing as my belt loops are already cut, I'm going to probably just going to do 6, honestly, 6 or 7. So I'm attaching this by just folding this over like this, and then folding the other end over like that, and then I'm just securing it with a straight stitch, and I'll go back and forth several times to make sure it's really secure. So there's nothing too complicated about that process. And just in case you want to use the same measurements, each belt loop is a little over 3 inches. So you can see here, okay, yeah, so roughly 3.5 inches for each of them, and you want to make sure they're all even. So that is basically all that's left to do for these shorts, and I'm going to go ahead and finish this now, and then I'll show you what it looks like all done. And here are the shorts. I really love, like, obviously the pocket is my favorite thing. Yeah, so the drawstring or the rope is supposed to kind of like go through the ring thing, but then again you could just leave it like this, and this is what it looks like. The belt loops, and then the back pockets too. I'm glad I added that. It's really cute. I like it, and I really love the color that I picked too. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was clear enough. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comment section. And like I promised in the video, the link to the video where I explained how to do a zipper fly in the front of your pants or shorts would be linked in the is linked in the description box right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye. Please don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more videos like this, and I will see you next time.